So good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being here for the third meeting of the Princeton Master Plan Steering Committee. Thank you for everything you've done so far. I'll begin just by showing us the agenda for today. It's a pretty packed one. And I'll give a brief overview before turning it over to Clark Caton Hintz. So first, we're doing what we're doing right now, the review of the agenda, then a review of the role of the steering committee and what we hope to accomplish today. This is really bringing us back to the first meeting, the introductory one, and then we'll look forward to first a summary of where we are right now based on the engagement hub, the document review and data gathering that's going on behind the scenes, the economic development survey that finished last Monday, the 15th, and I think just about all the signs have been picked up, and then what we have coming up, and then just time at the end for general Q&A and to confirm the next meeting date. As you'll see, this is a pretty packed meeting, so please hold with us as much as you can, and especially for that Q&A at the end. So with that being said, I'll stop sharing my screen and switch it over to Michael and Elaine from Clark Caton Hintz.
Good afternoon, folks. Thanks for the introduction, Justin, and for coordinating for the steering committee. It's been 2 months since we last met, and we've been undertaking many of the tasks that we need to undertake in order to move forward with the master plan and the process of adopting it. But what I wanted to do was, since it has been a while, is to remind and review with the steering committee what the role of the steering committee is and why we have these meetings. A steering committee is really an advisory board, and you have been selected because of your various involvement in various sectors of the community, and you may have a special interest in a certain component of the community or aspect of it that has relevance to the master plan itself. And so when we come to you as the advisory committee, we are looking for direction and advice from you. We want input from you. And ultimately, we are going to be asking you for decisions to be made about interim steps within the plan process, and also about those plan elements that compose the master plan that we are going to be bringing to the planning board for adoption. Furthermore, it's important that you feel that you can serve as an ambassador for the project, such that because of your involvement in the community beyond this subcommittee or steering committee, that you have the ability to advise other folks and give them an awareness of what's going on with the process and how they might be able to become involved and participate within this process for this public document. What we hope to accomplish today is primarily to move forward with the community survey. And this is a broad-based community vision survey that Joe Getz and Mark Lobauer are going to discuss a little bit more detail. Oh, I'm sorry. Liz is going to discuss. Joe's going to discuss the consumer survey. And we've really been working to move that forward. We've gone through iterations that have been reviewed, several iterations with the planning office. And we've also distributed to the steering committee for review and comment, and we've made revisions. And the ultimate goal today is to really be able to move forward with that, because that's a key part of our process. Moving on to where we are in the process, you received in your packet a grid or a table showing our anticipated schedule moving through the plan process. And what this shows you is that if you look to the bottom of the plan, the master plan, we have analyses, the draft plan, plan refinement, and plan adoption. And those are very broad categories of what's going on. But where we are right now is in the analysis phase. And this means that we are gathering data. And we're gathering data from both the municipality and other sources that we can use for decision making, or present you with for decision making, but also the surveys. We've got the consumer survey, which is just closed, We have a community survey that we are looking to launch in the second week of September. And we've got a student consumer survey that we're working on. And if you move back up to the top part of the chart, then you can see where those surveys fit in here, and that when the one that is closed is the consumer survey, closed in August, but the student consumer survey and the community vision and goal survey, the broad survey, they are going to launch in September, and we will not have the results of those surveys back until the end of October and beginning of November. At that point, there would be a reports generated that would feed us in terms of information, and we'd be able to present those to you. So right now, I know there's a lot of energy to move this plan forward, but until we get to the point where we've got our analyses relatively solid and completed so that we can inform the process of those analyses, we're not ready for the steering committee or the planning board to make any decisions with respect to the options for the master plan. So that gives you a sense of where we are in this process. So then you can have a sense of the timing and why we are eager to move forward with the survey. So the sooner we can get the data collected, then we'll be able to begin with the concepts that are going to find their way into the plan. So I've talked to you about existing document review and data gathering. We are working with the planning office. We are reliant on the planning office to provide us with accurate data, not the planning office necessarily, but the municipality to provide us with accurate base data, such as existing land use, open space and recreation areas, community facilities, and other data like that. So we are still working through some of those with the municipality. We understand that some of this data we may have to wait for because there's a consultant that's working on an environmental resource inventory at this point. So we are calibrating the timing of that to when we need the data to see if we can wait for that or not. So that is ongoing, and wanted the steering committee to understand that. Next on the list is the engagement hub, and I'm going to let we have Liz Ward from Susan G. Blickstein Associates here. They are our sub-consultant who is responsible for our public engagement, and that includes the engagement hub and the survey work that we're going to be doing, as well as the data collection there. So I'm going to let Liz discuss where we are with the engagement hub.
Okay, thank you, Michael. I'll just share my screen really quickly. There have been a few changes since we presented the hub at the last steering committee meeting. Probably the biggest would be that the URL has changed. So if anybody had bookmarked it last time, the new URL is moving forward is engage.princetonmasterplan.org. We added an FAQ page to the website. We also added more details to the timeline, which is
Liz's screen is showing up as black now, so I'm guessing she has some computer issues.
We're going to check with her. She may need to log back on.
So while we do that, why don't we, can we skip ahead to the economic development and JGSC group and a discussion about that, and we can circle back to Liz?
Sure.
Can we, I'm sorry, can we share our screen here? Is that possible? There we go.
Yes, you can. Yep.
I thought it might be appropriate, because we've been talking about process and so on and so forth. Those of you who were involved in the selection committee will maybe remember this slide. It's one that we put together to explain the community insights process, which is a trademark process that we've been using now for, I don't even remember, 15, 20 years or something. The field work was the first step in our process, and as it says on the chart, walking and windshield tours, interviews with stakeholders and business leaders and property owners and local business owners, and so on and so forth. We worked from a list that was generated in conversation with Justin and maybe Louise. I don't remember. And they gave us a list to work from initially. And when we went out into the field from interviews we were conducting, we found out that there were additional people that some of the people we were interviewing said, well, did you talk with so and such group and so person? So we expanded that to make sure that we could get a much broader representation. And that information is included in the first page of the status report that we generated. And then we also went off to do the survey, the consumer survey. The purpose of it is, and I think this is important because there's so many surveys going on out here. The purpose of the consumer survey is to understand the economic backstory that's taking place in the community. Rather than merely go to census data and use syndicated economic data, we don't believe that provides an accurate view of what's going on in the community, because we know that the residents who live in Princeton don't spend all of their money in Princeton. They shop outside of the community, and there are sometimes they'll dine outside of the community. And inversely, the businesses that are in Princeton don't get customers purely from Princeton. They attract customers from outside. So the purpose of this survey, which I'll note on here, the goal was to achieve 700 responses. We achieved almost 3,800 so far, because to that tally, we will add the student surveys. So, which I'll talk about in a minute. But then again, the purpose of this was to understand what the economics look like. Princeton, as everyone I'm sure knows, doesn't have a lot of industrial business, doesn't have a lot of heavy commercial. Most of that is located along
The Route 1 corridor.
the Route 1 corridor. And so what we're really looking at is consumer expenditures. Consumer expenditures account for about 70% of all domestic spending. You add on top of that military and government spending, and that's pretty much the whole ball of wax. So it's really important to understand not just how does a particular business perform, but more importantly, how do the community perform? What economic impact do they have? What can we do that will help us grow the economy in Princeton? So here's a very quick example. Stores like Hamilton Jewelers, they tend to be specialty stores. They tend to attract people from greater distances than, say, a Wawa or a pharmacy would. When you bring somebody from 15, 20, 25 minutes away to go to that store, one of the tactics that we've employed successfully for other clients is to figure out how to capture that person and get them to go to 1 or 2 additional stores, because now they're no longer 25 miles away. Now they're only 400 feet away from the other store. When you do that, and when you stimulate spending like that, in essence, you double the size of the local economy. So that's why it's important to measure how people shop, how they dine, what are their preferences, and those sorts of things. Those are the 2 pieces that we have completed so far. As Justin and I think Michael made the point, the consumer survey closed on the 15th of August. We're compiling the data. We've put preliminary findings on the status report for you. The data, as of yet, doesn't really support any conclusions. This is fact finding. We're now taking that data. We need to process it. We need to analyze it, so on and so forth. Beyond that, I think there was a question. I'm going to stop sharing this for a moment. I think there was a question about how did we deal with duplicate entries into the survey. And here's what happens. When you're dealing with non-English speaking populations, or when you're dealing with minority populations, in our experience, we've learned that sometimes there's a concern not about language as much as there is about trust. People who don't know us, who don't trust us as an outsider, don't necessarily want to go on surveys and share all their opinions, because going in, they don't know all the questions they're going to be asked. What we've done with other communities, Livingston, New Jersey being an example, is we've gotten people who are familiar in the community to go into those special populations and to carry an iPad and to sit down and be a trusting face who can engage that person, ask the questions, and then enter them into the survey on their behalf. The problem with that is our surveys are typically set up to prevent duplicate entries so that we don't get ballot box stuffing kind of thing. So we turned that off to allow people to do that with the iPod. And it's not, I mean the iPad, and it's not particularly rare that we do this. We do it from time to time. In order to protect the integrity of the survey from that, we then took all of the survey responses and downloaded them and literally examined them one by one by one. There is data that we collect that allows us to know, did one person put in 6 responses, or did one person come in and answer the survey 20 times? We go through that process. We identified anything that we think may be suspicious looking in that regard, and then we went back and did further examination on those. And in this case, we did find some responses that appeared to be deliberately duplicated, and those were extracted from the numbers before we started any analysis. Beyond that, I'm not sure what else we can share with you. We have the steering committee packet has our update report in it, and I don't know if it's now or later. We'll be happy to answer questions whenever the appropriate time is for that.
Michael, why don't we let Liz finish up with what she was showing, and then we could have
Yeah.
questions on both.
Yeah. Thankfully, Liz has been able to make her connection back to us. So, Liz, sorry that you had that trouble, but please let's hear about the engagement hub. Thank you.
Yeah, no, sorry about that. I think that's the first time that's ever happened. So, 2.5 years in, and there it goes. So,
Welcome back.
yeah, thank you. So yeah, I'll just finish sharing. And I think it's important to just remember that this is, it will be constantly being updated. It's gonna, as the project moves along and documents are created, they'll be posted, events will be added. The survey will be posted here. So it's a living site that will as information is shared with the public, will be updated. So, it's a little, it's a little light now, but as we move through the process, it will get more and more active. So I think that was all for the engagement hub, unless anyone has any questions about it.
Can you show where the timeline's been updated?
Oh, yeah. All right, so here's it's on the about page. And then if you click on the collapse, see all phases, and it has sort of, a broken out of sort of, it's not as detailed as the timeline that we have in our packet today. That's mostly because, if you say November, then people will expect November, but how things might slip to December. So kind of get an idea of when these community outreach activities will be taking place.
Thanks.
So I can see that Louise, you have a question?
Yes, I did. I think that the FAQ could use some expansion. I particularly zeroed in on the what is the master plan used for answer, and I think that it's a whole lot more than what is there now. I know that these are not meant to be exhaustive, but I think it's important that we explain its utility beyond the use of land. Because it guides so much more than that. And of course, land use is a huge chunk of it, and then that's connected to many other principles and elements, et cetera, in the master plans. But so So I guess one question is, what's the right process for suggesting additional language or for suggesting additional questions and answers? And is this a vehicle that we could use to address questions that are raised publicly, either through letters to the editor or through, outreach to individual, this wouldn't be publicly, but also by, folks calling members of the steering committee and saying, hey, what's the deal with XYZ? Is there a way through FAQ or through some associated part of the site where we can address, sort of publicly lay out questions that are bubbling up and address those in a systematic way?
Yeah, I mean, from the, the website, yes, we can add information. We will need guidance. So I guess this is more of a question for Justin and Michael on what content goes in, but I mean, we're happy to make sure that the content that is desired is available and visible for people.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about since the beginning, the engagement hub being like a two-way communications vehicle. So I'm just wanting to understand how people in the community can contribute their thoughts and questions, and how it really functions as a two-way platform.
Right. Yeah, there are additional sort of tools that, kind of fall under the umbrella of engagement hubs that would provide more of those, two-way discussions. They're currently not included in our scope, but I think that would be a separate conversation, I would think, with the municipality about, how important it is to, make these tools available. There's a wide range of tools and costs associated with all of these.
Well, I'm not asking for mission creep. I did think that from the beginning, we talked about ways for the public to use the engagement hub to both provide information or pose questions, and also to gather information. And this seems to me to be a great information resource. I'm not throwing shade on it in that respect, but I'm just, is there a way, for example, for a member of the public to suggest a question to add to the FAQ?
I mean, this is Michael right now. There is no way at this point that process would have to be explored with the municipality. What is the preference?
Okay.
How that happens? So if questions are coming in, and there may be lots of questions, but who decides what's important enough that it needs to show up here? And that's going to be something that it's going to be such a common question that it's going to be routinely asked and needs to be answered. And so that's the purpose of an FAQ, right? These are the frequently asked questions. So we have to talk about the process for that and how that would happen. And I don't know what if Justin has anything that he could suggest for that. But like, as Liz said, there's lots of tools that can be activated with this hub. But they all require additional, effort, and not just the effort to engage it, but also the monitoring and the ongoing stewardship of these elements and aspects of the hub. Is that correctly said, Liz?
Correct. Right, we could add comment boxes, and it could be sent. Right now we have Justin as the contact. We can have a comment box that gets sent to Social Pinpoint, and we can forward them to Justin or someone else. So there are things that could be done more simply. So they're,
And what's important too is that if something requires a response, that the response has to be crafted, right? It's not just, there's no off the cuff responses. These have to be thoughtful. They have to be representations of the municipal response. It's not Liz's
Right.
response, not my response, not Justin's response. It's the municipal response. So there's a stewardship that has to happen here and a care that has to be taken. So that's
Okay, well, maybe I don't want to go, I don't want to consume a whole bunch of time with this, but maybe, if members of the steering committee are getting questions, especially if they're getting the same kinds of questions, please do forward those to Justin, who, is the point person in the municipal building, and he, working with consultants, can noodle through which ones, should be added to the FAQs. And is there any, I'm sorry that I haven't perused the PrincetonMasterPlan.org site enough to know this, but is there any contact us button at all?
Yes, there is, and it goes to me.
Okay, great.
So feel free also to that point, any of the, steering committee, subcommittee members, if you want to reach out to me and talk to me either in person, at our office, out anywhere in town, I'm happy to do that. I've done that with some folks so far. And I think, Louise, it's a great idea to update that FAQ. We'll see the ways we can do it. If it's not in the scope, we also have other municipal ways. I'd rather keep everything to this website. But I think the transparency and the outreach is so important that we'll make it work.
Are there any other questions about the engagement hub or about the consumer survey preliminary discussion that Joe just went through? No?
Oh, yeah, Christine has a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that Justin worked really hard to have the survey translated into Spanish. I'm not sure if it was translated into other languages, and then put effort into, making sure that we tried to include the input of non-English speaking members of our community, because they are important consumers as well. And I'm hoping, Joseph, you could help us understand to what degree do you think that we were able to capture their needs as consumers in this community?
But I think the first part of that, or the last part of that question, I think, Justin, you did some outreach with respect to the Spanish language survey?
Yeah, so we created a new Spanish language survey. As you know, it certainly was not perfect. It was a Google Translate, and it started later than the other one. So I will, note all those things and note how we're going to do better in the future. We were able to get 18 completed responses, 14 of which were in Spanish, 15 of the 18 self-identified as Hispanic or Latinx. So, it's a small number out of the total number, which may also, I don't know, Joe's, if he knows the English speaking surveys or surveys in English, but Hispanic or Latinx members that did that. So that was kind of the outreach. And in the future, we are going to work with our Health and Human Services Department. This was kind of a little rush, as well as the steering committee members. I know a lot of the surveys I saw, when it said, "How'd you get here?" or "Who told you about the survey?" it said Miss Liliana. So I was happy to see that. But we're going to make sure that, at least on the municipal end, we're definitely prioritizing that. And I know Susan Blickstein's group has thought about that. So I don't know if Liz has any more specifics on that.
And there's also, Asian American community members,
Absolutely.
consumers as well. And, perhaps there's an opportunity I know you've closed the survey, the consumer survey, but I hope maybe we can figure out ways to make sure that the needs of those members of our community are represented as consumers.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe Joe, you can speak to that just a little bit about your experience in your process and how that might relate to it.
Sure, sure, Michael. So to answer your question directly, Christine, you may recall from one of the early meetings, there was a question about could we include or would we include ethnic identity as one of the questions? And we typically don't, because ethnic identity doesn't play a large role in economic and consumer spending. I mean, certainly there are fringe components of it, but the central part of economic development really relies less upon what your ethnic background is and more upon your actual behavior in stores and restaurants and things like that. But we said that for the purpose of this, and I don't recall who asked this the question, but I think the question was more specifically, how do we know that we are reaching out in that question specifically to the Asian community? And we said, well, we'll add this question, we'll monitor it throughout the process, and we'll compare that to census data, so that if the Asian community represents 10% of the population, then we want to hopefully get 10% of the survey responses from people who self-identify as being, I think it was Asian or Pacific Islander. We did that. We monitored it throughout the process, and we did have 5% of the total audience identified themselves as Hispanic or Latinx, which is slightly lower than what the census numbers are. I think, I don't have those in front of me, but I think they were 7% or something like that. But we got a good representative sampling of it. And another 10 or 11% self-identified as the Asian community. When we were going through for the checking for duplication, we did see situations where we had multiple entries from one identified source for multiple Asian responses. So the indication to us was someone was doing that outreach that we had talked about earlier on. And at the end of the day, the number of responses from Caucasian or white is slightly, that's the largest group, and it's slightly higher than what you might find in census data. But there's two things to keep in mind. One is all surveys are self-selecting. We don't have the ability to force anybody to answer, to participate. And number two, the survey questions not just residents, but it also questions visitors from outside and people who work here but live elsewhere. So the numbers don't always closely align, but had there been any concern on our part that we were not getting representative samplings, there were steps we could have taken. Doing a Spanish language survey is one thing, reaching out to the community to have them do outreach in their own neighborhoods is another. Overall, I'm not at all concerned or disappointed with the response that we got. I think it's appropriate for what we're trying to do.
Joe, ask the members of the steering committee who have connections with community groups, of your opinion, do you think that their views were incorporated, or is there more that we can do to make sure that they're incorporated throughout the rest of the
I think we have. Was that a question to me? I'm sorry.
No, that was to the other folks, Joe.
Sorry, my mistake.
And I saw Ms. Satterfield with her hand up, and then.
And then I'd like to make a point on this after Ms. Satterfield, please. Thanks.
And you can mute yourself again.
Oh, can you hear me now? Sorry.
Yes, we can.
The Witherspoon Jackson Neighborhood Association is having a meeting on Saturday at the Arts Council at 9:30. And that's when you can possibly get a group of participants if you're still doing the questionnaire. At least you'll get some people in the Witherspoon Jackson community.
Definitely. I can go there and tell about the website to stay informed for the next questionnaire.
That would be good. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Justin, if I may, I wanted to put something in a broader context that Joe had mentioned. He said that you have about a 7% makeup of people that are Hispanic or identify as Latinx in the Princeton community. In our survey responses, and Joe mentioned the number close to 3,800, it was actually 3,778 responses. 5% of those were the respondents self-identified as Hispanic or Latinx, as Joe said. Now, if you do the math, that's 189 people. That's more than 10 times more people did that community-wide survey and self-identified as Hispanics than we were able to pick up. Then I shouldn't say we, then Justin and the municipal officials were able to pick up through direct contact. So I just point out, Christine, that there's a limit to what you're going to be able to do when you try these extraordinary measures to get people to respond. And I honestly think you can look at the actual results that we obtained through the community-wide survey and feel confident that we did get a good representative sampling of the Hispanic community.
And I saw Liliana was next, and then Phil has his hand up as well.
Hi, thanks. I think that in reference to the Latino community, I think it's just the fear of their legal status, and at the same time of not understanding and not feeling part of the community. So I think we just need to little by little start breaking all those all those kind of bridges until they understand that this is something for all of us. So we just have to be patient and keep approaching them and letting them know that this is for all. So it's going to take a while.
Thank you. And some of the stores on Witherspoon were very gracious when I asked them if I could put signs up as well. So I thank them for that. And Phil?
Yeah, hi. Appreciate the efforts with the Asian American community. Wanted to see if in the survey work that you were able to track the affordable housing population in any way. I don't know if that was a question on the survey or not, that we make sure we have their voices heard.
I'll answer that. It's Elaine. We did ask about income. We didn't track it specifically to housing units that they live in.
And kind of similar to like Liliana was saying about the Hispanic community, I got some phone calls based on the yellow signs, just super anecdotal, saying, what is this? Can I fill it out? I live in Princeton Community Village. Is this for me? And there was kind of a lot of word of mouth from that point forward. So, I think dispelling some of those concerns early on was helpful for us, and reaching out to some of the different groups in town, I think helped as well. And Joe, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to pile on and say to you, the community itself should be very, very proud of what was accomplished in the survey. In 25 years of having done this, and we've done these surveys in heavily populated areas. I mean, Times Square, New York, and all the boroughs up there, and so on and so forth. Princeton, the number of responses that you have received, and as we said, it's almost 3,800. That doesn't yet count the student survey population. So if we get a good response from Princeton University, the number is probably going to go up a few hundred more. It's probably one of the 5 largest responses that we've gotten in the past 25 years. When you think about something like a gubernatorial election or a presidential election, where the results are going to be projected nationally or across the state, they generally look for a population of around 1,305 survey responses. So I just want to make the point that even though we are not projecting these, we are using them as they've been recorded. It's really a good accomplishment in terms of the amount of participation, the number of people who participated. So I just wanted to pile on to Jason's efforts. And I think the community did a really good job until you could actually see, we monitor the results day by day, and you could actually see when there was a blurb in the newspaper or there was an email blast from an organization, we could actually see the spike, in the responses for that day. Just if that helps to offer any satisfaction or comfort to anyone.
Thanks, Joe. And we're right on track, but I want to see if any of the voices we haven't heard from have anything to say about either this survey, the engagement hub, or any of the other things. So Nick or Emma? No, nothing right now. Brian, Sam, Mayor?
I'd just like to thank Liliana, and also many of you know I work at the library, and the library, while we have a diverse staff and do translation, we're also exploring, there's a group at Rutgers that provides translation services at free or low rates, an international student group. So I think it's absent a Google language plugin for the website, which isn't going to happen based on cost, that we utilize as many tools as possible that are free, that are, that don't add cost to our consultants, to make sure that the surveys are available there's a simplified Chinese that's a mix of Cantonese and Mandarin that we use at the library, that's mostly well understood.
Absolutely. And I know for the Engagement Hub, we do have Google Translate into dozens of languages on there. For the future surveys, I believe the Blickstein group, as you saw in the RFP, is putting them in at least English and Spanish. And the new flyers that are going to go up, as I believe you saw last time, we're just verifying the QR codes are in English, Spanish, and I'm not sure what the third is. It simplified Chinese?
Correct. Yes.
Great.
So yeah, on all the social media, we'll make sure those 3 languages appear.
And as it's been alluded to a couple times already, and I was going to mention this when we talk about outreach later, just the more that the steering committee members can refer either me to someone or CC me or say, hey, you're going to this meeting, but this at 11 a.m. in the courtyard of the shopping center when people meet to play mahjong, that's actually where the community is. Please, let me know all of those things, and we'll make every effort to reach out where it's actually reaching people.
This is Elaine. Just before we move on, I want to echo what Justin just said and to thank Ms. Liliana for what she said. And I think to emphasize that one of the huge things that we're learning in this process is there is no such thing as too much outreach. So no matter which community we're interested in reaching, the more we can touch them and build the trust that Ms. Liliana was talking about, the more representative the responses are going to be.
And Mia, did you want to say something before we moved on?
No, I'm good. I just was having some computer problems and I'm now able to log in. Thank you.
So we can, Justin, we can move on.
Yes, please do.
So we reserve the remainder of the meeting to really talk about what you should be expecting coming up and to talk through the community vision survey, which we've received many comments. So as we talked about, the second component of the consumer survey, the student consumer survey, is planned for early September. Joe, is there anything outstanding in terms of steps we need to cover before that can happen?
No, Michael. Actually, the survey is still live. We had launched it in, I think, the end of April, and the seminary, the Princeton Theological Seminary, allowed us to send out an email with a link directly to the survey, and about a third of their student body responded within a week or 10 days. We've asked for the same thing from Princeton University. So my point is there's no reason to alter the survey at this point. Actually, we wouldn't want to alter it because it's now live and has responses. And we have, through Elaine and your firm have reached out to Princeton to try and coordinate it. I just want to emphasize there's a question about, you know, when will we have the survey completed from students? Our experience is if you send them an email, 2, 3 emails over the course of 10 days, you get such a tremendous response from them that in 2 weeks it's done. We're doing tabulations and calculations. So we'll see how that outreach works on campus. But my point is that we could be through this very quickly and then get into the tabulation of the survey responses. And I know we have been asked, will they be separated? And the answer is yes. You will be able to see responses from students as well as seeing responses from residents versus non-residents and that sort of thing. So that distinction will be in the reporting that we provide.
Right.
If I could jump in, your fellow steering committee member, Kristen Applegate, wasn't able to make it today. She might try to jump on. She's, I think, double and triple and quadruple booked. But I had some great conversations with her this week in the university. They're fully on board with really ramping this up mid-September after the students are back. And we've been talking strategies to make sure we reach out to the students. And we're all pretty confident. Their student government person seems to be very responsive to this and to sending out that email or some other outreach directly from them. So we'll monitor it when it's more so open. And if we need to, put some more stuff or go table out by Small World or by the liquor store even, right up there by the gates. I mentioned maybe we could go table by the football game. I don't know if that really flies with Princeton University, but we'll find other ways.
Can I just add on to that, Justin? We have found there are a number of things that you can do to do the outreach, but we found over the years that a simple email that will get opened by the students with a direct link to the survey, and I'll use Rowan University as an example. As I recall, we sent it out and in 3 days had 1,300 responses. So there's lots of thoughts about how you can do outreach and so on and so forth. I know there has been a concern. I've spoken with Christine about this previously, that there's a concern that the students may not open the email, but I'll go back to the point, we put signs everywhere. We can't force people to take a survey, but it can be done very effectively and very efficiently. And we found that way works, really well. So we're hoping they just do that. And if they do, we'll be in and out in 2 weeks. It'll be easy. Okay.
Right.
And I see Emma's hand up.
I just wanted to mention, as a previous college student, I definitely agree with the emailing and maybe planning to send some follow-ups in case they miss it or think like, oh, I'll do it later. And then, I think having flyers in different department buildings with an easy QR code where they can just scan it, they're waiting for their class to start, whatever, by the bathrooms. I think that's another way you can do it. I think especially for students, it's all about like ease, technology, and yeah, those are my points.
Great. Thanks. And we've definitely seen interest. Even from looking at the attendees at some of these meetings, we're not so, everyone's willing to cross Nassau Street both ways this time.
Okay. Anything else on the student survey? I don't see any hands. B, the economic development report, that's something, look for that in November. This is after the surveys have all closed and the analysis has been done. We'll be reviewing that and using that to inform the plan. The next thing, analysis of existing documents. We prepared about to finish preparing a briefing for the steering committee. One of the things that is important to remember about this process, this is a master plan, but it's also a master plan re-examination report. We suggested, I think the original RFQ was for this, to combine these efforts in such a way that they mesh together, because a master plan reexamination report, for those of you who are not as familiar, is required every 10 years according to the municipal land use law in order to ensure that your zoning has a rebuttable presumption of validity. And there's a series of statutory points that need to be addressed within the reexamination report. And we are going to be doing that as part of the master plan. We will check all the boxes so it can be it can constitute a reexamination report as well as the master plan. The master plan land use plan element also includes a portion of that which talks about assumptions and goals, objectives, and policies. And that's dovetails very nicely with the reexamination report. And so in order to provide the basis for this group to give us decisions on existing policies that should be continued, or existing policies that should be abandoned, or existing policies that be changed, we are providing to you in the next few weeks a document which would really be a primer on the existing planning policies that we have found in reviewing all of Princeton's documents. And we're summarizing those so that you'll have a summary that includes a history or an accounting of plans and reports that have been done, and the dates when they have been done, and those that have been adopted, and then a summary of the policies that we found within the last reexamination report and other master plan documents. So you'll have those in one place, and they'll be related to specific sectors of the master plan. For instance, some of the policies will relate to land use, and some will relate to housing, and some will relate to open space or other things. And so that's a real important thing to have. And we're going to be providing that to you in advance of the results from the surveys, because we want you to be able to digest it and to be able to ask us questions about it and to have some cogitation about where you might want to be going. And these are really the overarching ideas that the master plan is going to be looking to implement. They may not be very detailed at this point. The details will come in the various elements in most cases. But once you have the survey results and the economic information and the community survey results, you're then going to be able to, and this is the way we think the steering committee should approach this, is that you'll be able to then have more information to start approaching these goals, objectives, and policies with an eye towards what the survey information is telling you, what you're hearing from the public, and what the analyses that we're going to start doing will tell you. If we gave them to you now and we said, okay, tell us what you think, you wouldn't have the basis to make a decision on that because you haven't heard the survey results. You haven't looked at any other analyses. So that's coming. It's really a primer. And I imagine that you will have questions for us after that is delivered to you, and we're going to make time to answer those questions. Yes, Louise Wilson has a hand up.
Looking forward to that exercise, which I think is going to be really interesting. What just occurred to me is that it'll be important for us to look to you for some guidance on how to prioritize and how to be, really clear about those goals and objectives and assumptions and policies. Because one of the critiques of our current master plan that I have heard is that it seeks to be all things to all people. That you can look in there and find an argument to support virtually any position that might be taken. And so I don't have in my head some way to address that, or and nor do I know whether it really presents a big problem, except when the planning board is hearing arguments from applicants or members of the public that something is or is not consistent with the master plan, which is a really, of course, very important consideration for the board when it's hearing requests for variances or when it's hearing objections from the public. So again, I just think that that exercise that this steering committee will undertake is going to be just a really important one. So I'm looking forward to seeing what you send out and how we sort of structure that discussion on identifying how those might change and how they might be, how certain priorities might rise above others.
Okay, Mayor?
Yeah, thank you. I guess I'd be concerned about how much information is going to come to everybody at one time and over what length of time. So personally, I don't know that I need to see the results of the survey to help me digest and react to your master plan reexamination of the existing master plan, or for me to react to current assumptions. I think, first of all, we know the current master plan is way out of date. So a lot of stuff there, I imagine, may not pertain any longer, or just should not pertain. So anyway, I just want to make sure that you don't jam too much at everybody at one length at one point in time, because so I just think you could stretch it out. And if you have the master plan reexamination and the assumptions and goals ready to go, I would not wait till you have the survey or other materials. I don't think it all needs to happen at once.
Well, I appreciate that. And that's one of the reasons why I'm targeting in the next couple of weeks, because you're going to have this gap of the surveys are going to be ongoing. So we're not going to, once the surveys start, we've got a month or so or more before we get those results. So you're going to have that time period to digest it. And that's what I'm hoping. So hopefully that fits into your thoughts as to the process.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the primer? The policy primer is what I'm calling it. Okay. D, the amendment to the housing plan element and fair share plan. We had a conversation with your affordable housing attorney yesterday to confirm what we're doing with the housing plan amendment element and fair share plan. And this is really a limited update to the adopted 2020 amended housing plan element fair share plan that was approved by the court at a compliance hearing. This is going to be updated to include mechanisms which have where affordable housing is being produced that have come online or in the process subsequent to the judgment of repose, and also to finalize the documentation that's necessary that we still are on the hook for in terms of our judgment of compliance. We're going to use this time to finish that up. It will, unlike the new elements that we're providing or preparing, this is a 1,000+ page document, and we are going to make a simple update to this to reflect these changes and add the necessary appendices to the existing stack of appendices that we have in a way that would allow us to return to or submit it to the court as evidence of compliance with our judgment. So
and it will also be one updated document that will be the housing plan element of this new master plan.
That's correct. That's correct.
I see Alvin has his hand up.
Yes.
Give examples of what some of the updates are.
The updates would reflect the inclusionary project at the corner of Harrison and Terhune, the wind project. It would reflect, I think Avalon's already in there.
The shopping center's in there.
The shopping center's already in there. If there's a change to the Franklin and Maple project that we need to address, that would be in there.
And then the rest is documentation.
The rest is documentation on deed restrictions for units that have been controlled or have controls on them for a period of time, and some other documentation related to spending, and I think that's it. Yeah. So.
The mayor.
Hey, if I could ask another question, somewhere in this overall master plan process, what is there some group that's looking at density overall? How much density is good? At what point density is no longer a good thing or it impacts the town? Is there a group that's looking at how we're doing affordable housing and comparing the cost for the town to pay for doing affordable housing versus having developers come in, and then we do pilots to kind of compare, here's the cost if you're doing a pilot versus here's the cost if you're doing it yourself. You know, there's in pilot programs, taxes are paid all to the municipality, not to the schools, not to the county. So I'm just curious, does this process get into that at some point, or?
Yeah, the process for the housing plan documentation is rooted in, it's already been resolved in terms of the settlement of litigation and the judgment of compliance and repose.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I mean, I get that for what we've already done, but I'm looking to the future. There's another round of affordable housing. So I'm just curious as to, is this something that's being looked at as we develop this master plan? Because obviously how we treat affordable housing and its impact in the future is.
Yeah, let me back up to, you started asking questions about density and intensity of development. Those types of analyses or policies are developed in the land use plan element, which this group will be deciding on. So, you know, in terms of it's a core of the master plan is looking at, you know, existing land use, the existing zoning, and making decisions about how these zones are what kind of densities, relative densities are going to happen in these areas. If there are going to be any changes, that's the place where this happens, and that will be this committee is charged with determining that. So that's a decision that this committee will be making. There's in terms of how it relates to affordable housing and taxes and things like that. That's not the role of the master plan at this point. There's not going to be any evaluation of the benefits or potential of pilots or any of that other stuff. That is outside of the master plan, and that deals with financial agreements and economics beyond the master plan. Louise?
I'm going to throw out as an idea for down the road, this steering committee may choose to have a subcommittee that is looking particularly sharply on these exact questions that Mark Frieda just raised, because the land use element should be specific about recommending areas of town, even parcels that it feels or that are deemed to be appropriate for affordable housing. It should speak to specifics of density and other things that then are set forth in ordinances. And so, yeah, those will be really important decisions to make, and probably deserve close scrutiny by a smaller group if the steering committee decides that makes sense, and then that group can recommend and defend its recommendations. Ultimately, if this steering committee can't reach consensus on, and I'm probably getting way ahead of myself, but if there are disagreements about what's appropriate in the way of density or areas or neighborhoods or parcels appropriate for this, that, and the other thing, if no consensus emerges, it will then really fall to the master plan committee a subcommittee of the planning board to sort of suss through what's been thought about and discussed and recommended, because it'll be the master plan subcommittee that ultimately recommends the master plan update as a whole to the planning board for adoption. Again, I'm thinking way down the road, but those very questions that you raised, Mayor, are going to be, you know, some of the more pointed ones for us all to be considering in a few months.
Okay.
Do you disagree, Michael? If you think I have
I'm not, I think,
misrepresented or whatever, feel
I
free.
don't know that we need to get into process or anything right now on that. I just think that the general concept of, you know, we're going to deal with density is important. So next, the community visioning survey. So we had prepared drafts of this. We've gone back and forth with Justin on it, and then we provided it to the steering committee. We've gotten some comments back and we've made some edits. So Liz, so let me just, before we get into any discussion about it, I just want to give you the basics. You know, we're here today, as I said in the beginning, we want to make sure we would like to have approval by this committee to move forward with it and be able to launch it in the second week of September 12th. And if that's the case, then we'll talk about outreach and we'll coordinate with you know, the municipal side of things for how this outreach is going to occur. There's other ways to generate interest in this through community meetings and pop-ups and other things. So the first thing is the latest and greatest version of the survey was provided to the committee, but we did receive some comments today. Liz, can you talk about some of the changes that we made?
Yeah, so thank you. And thank you everybody for taking time to look at the survey and provide your input. It was very helpful. And I think we're able to incorporate a lot of your comments, and I think it's a stronger survey because of it. We did just get some comments from Kristen Applegate and the Princeton Communications today. And a lot of it is kind of wordsmithing, editorial on like phrasing of the questions that I think are great and we'll be able to incorporate, and we'll make it a more straightforward survey for people to answer. So we appreciate everyone's time and effort on that. You know, I just want to say, oh, go ahead.
Oh, can I just jump in on that? So we've actually heard from the public saying, why aren't you tapping into the great resources we have at Princeton University? You know, these polling experts. We're literally the town where, you know, Gallup started as well. So that feedback's from the Princeton University Survey Research Center, and they have some great things that I hope we could incorporate. And we thank them for, you know, taking their time to help us out too.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, what you have, I think about half the questions, they did recommend some rewording, and they don't change the question, but I think they just make it a lot more simple for people to understand. So yes, I was, you know, when it comes in late and you're like, oh gosh, and then you open it and you're like, oh no, this is great. Thank you so much. So we do appreciate that resource. So yeah, the purpose of this first survey really is to get like the broad baseline, you know, of issues, opportunities, community needs. There'll be that second survey that will come like late winter that will be, you know, a lot more geared and detailed on, you know, specific recommendations. So this is a high level survey. It's going to help us with, you know, drafting the vision and goals and informing some of the existing conditions analysis that CCH is working on. You know, the survey is a little long. It is 36 questions, but, you know, 12 of those are demographic questions, 24 are content questions. So the demographic questions are really going to help us make sure that we are, you know, getting a representative sample of the community and help tailor the efforts that will be outside for those activities. You know, listening through all the work of the consumer survey and all the municipal staff and all the steering committee members going out to their groups. You know, it's kind of great. It's like this test case, and it seems to have gotten that many responses is great. So I'm hopeful that we'll also be able to get a lot of responses on the visioning survey. You know, for some plans, we haven't called it a survey, but a questionnaire. I don't know if because they're following so close together, the consumer survey and now this community visioning survey, if there'll be any sense that there might be some confusion. People might think that they've already responded to the survey. I don't know if that's a consideration. You know, the only problem with questionnaire is that it's a bigger word. And so fitting it on like graphics and stuff, it's, you know, it's a little bit more, but I don't know if just listening to this discussion today, especially since the student survey will be going on at the same time, if there'll be any issues. I don't see a problem changing it to a questionnaire, but we're happy to keep it a survey as well. So if anyone has any thoughts about that, I'd love to hear them. Yeah, so once it's approved, we'll, you know, work on programming it in the engagement hub, which has the translation embedded in it. It'll take about, you know, a week or two to test it, make sure it works on multiple devices. And, you know, then we have social media graphics and flyers that we'll share with the municipality as well as all of you to help distribute and promote. As Michael said, you're the ambassadors for this project, so we appreciate all your help and assistance. So yeah, we do anticipate that it will be open for the 2 months. You know, of a municipality of Princeton size, I would, you know, expect about 1,000 responses would be great for a community survey. You know, we can monitor, we can always extend if by a week or two, if we're not getting the responses we need. You know, it's not a statistical survey, so you know it's really just an input tool. So I think that's pretty much it for now. I mean, we anticipate that it'll take each person about 15 minutes to complete the survey, which, you know, usually we'd like to aim for around 10. We added 2 open-ended questions, which I think is an opportunity, you know, for people to really give us their thoughts and their, you know, but that takes a little bit more time to analyze on our end. But if people felt that it was a little bit longer and we wanted to get it down a little bit, I think, you know, there are a couple questions, transportation related questions, like the school commute questions could possibly be deleted since that doesn't involve everyone. And there's a bicycle pedestrian master plan that's not too old that we might be able to pull some information from. So yeah, those are where we are with it. Anyone have any questions or thoughts? We'd love to hear them and, you know, start moving forward.
And I see Emma's hand up.
Thank you. So I was looking through the questions, and unfortunately I was traveling when the last meeting happened, so I'm sorry I didn't submit things in advance. But I just wanted to clarify for the age category between like 15 to 24 who might still be living with their parents and family members, or their parents' house is just still their permanent address. Should they be selecting, in terms of their household, live with other family partner, no children? Because, you know, they might not have children, but they're the children of the household. So I was just wondering about that. And then the follow-up questions would be, do they select other because they're not financially responsible if their parents are owning or renting? I was just wondering if there's any distinction there.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. I think you're bringing up a demographic that probably is not represented in the choices that we provided. So I think we can add another that is, you know, live with family. You know, we could reword those 2 bottom ones, I think.
Yeah, I think since
Yeah.
you do open up, for example, in the age question, you are opening it up to people under 15, 15 to 24, even older, especially with the pandemic, you know, people are living, you know, in that age category might still be at home. I think it's important to separate that. And then that also brought my follow-up question, which I just thought about, and it might have already been answered, but the student survey, is it just Princeton University students? Or is it students that go to like any of the schools in the Princeton area? So it's just Princeton University, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
it's only Princeton University. We did tried to launch this back in late April, early May, and we did the theological seminary, participated back then. So at this point, it is only Princeton that we're seeking input from.
Okay, then I definitely would suggest considering the other student demographic in town, which be any of the, considering, you know, the age category. You know, 15 would be any of the high schools. And then also that brings back the college students who went to college outside of New Jersey or not Princeton University, but still, you know, live in Princeton.
I'm not sure how we would reach those, to be honest, Emma.
Oh, this is for Liz.
I'm sorry.
I think she's speaking to Liz's survey.
I'm going to shut up now, folks.
Well, I mean, I understand the question of how you would reach them. And for example, I think that's like my big connection is town is, for example, all the people who went to Princeton High School or other high schools in town who, you know, maybe they don't live full year in Princeton, but they're frequently there because their parents still have a house here. And, you know, they definitely, you know, shop, dine in Princeton, attend events, but they fall into that, you know, 15 to 24 age category.
Definitely, and we're going to try to reach them as much as possible too, especially with everyone's help here. 'Cause
Right,
I
and
think
I'll
we're-
try to reach out to them too, in
Yeah.
terms of that being my main network.
Great. And so the first question is about zip code, but it doesn't mean you have to have one of our 2 zip codes to take it. So it's even more important if someone's got a New York City one, or if they go to school somewhere,
Exactly.
they want to put that and kind of have that reflected within there. You know, that's certainly very valid, especially when we hear people say, I grew up here, but I can't, you know, live here, and kind of seeing how the answers might, you know, work around that and, you know, gaining that input too.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense for that connection to Princeton. I think we need to add at least an other so people could enter. I grew up in Princeton, or I lived in Princeton, or, you know, so we're getting the full picture of who they are.
Right. Yeah. Like just as an example, my sister, you know, still lives, she goes to school in Virginia, college, but she comes home every break and definitely still considers Princeton her hometown, but she lives, you know, in her family's house with her parents. So I was just wondering, like, in terms of that, what she would answer, but she was also the kind of person who would want to participate in this kind of survey.
Yeah, thank you, Emma. That makes sense. We'll make sure that there are options for those questions.
Yeah, thanks.
And I see Christine and Louise.
Hi, the feedback I had given to Justin, I can see there are some changes to the survey, but I still think it could use some work in terms of de-jargonizing it and taking out some of the planner speak that most members of the community probably wouldn't understand. You know, like, what is a community facility or an amenity? Is that a school? Is that a library? I think those are terms that some of us might understand. You know, terms like, or phrases like compact, walkable, mixed use. Like, I don't know, everybody knows what mixed use is to know why they might want to see more of that. So I think, you know, it would be really beneficial to try to de-jargonize some of this.
Yeah, no, and we did get another comment sort of about that came out after this was sent out about making sure that the library and the pool are represented in that community facility. So that's on our list. We'll give that another pass of all of those words that, you know, are yeah, that we're so used to that we don't even see. So that's a good point. We'll definitely make it another pass through to make sure that your average person knows what we're asking.
Yeah, if you can explain a little bit more about how you will translate this. I've come to learn that, Google Translate can do a pretty good job, but it doesn't always capture the sort of regional, terms. It probably does require, if you want to get a good response from someone who's not a native English speaker, that translating it does require some specific translation expertise. Can you explain how who will be doing the translating?
Yeah, we have two people on staff, one who's a Spanish speaker, and then the other, and as well as a native Chinese speaker. So they will be able to look, they look through those things for us. It is a little hard on the Google Translate tool. I mean, so for any paper surveys that will, could exist, they'd be translated and checked, but you can't. The Google Translate tool is what it is. We can't, like on the Social Pinpoint site, we can't, make edits to how they translate.
But that's kind of two different things still. The survey is going to be human translated. The website is the Google Translate.
But
And
if we find that, to Christine's point, if we find that in looking at, if some of us can look at how it translates to Spanish, how it translates to Chinese, and see certain things that could be reworded in the English version to be, if they're particularly problematic, I know you can parse it to death, but maybe there can at least be a first pass at, looking at how everything translates and seeing if there are really any things that stand out that need to be corrected or clarified. The comment I was going to make, it relates to Emma's comment. When the community survey is issued, we can prepare a press release or media announcement or whatever kind of cover message that goes out to the general public and encourage people to forward the survey to members of their family who or folks that they know who don't live here full time but visit frequently. And I know I did that even with with my own family with the economic development survey. So I think that's one way to get it more of those folks.
definitely. And I forgot to mention before, glossed right over it, but for the economic survey, we reached out to about 30 community groups. And like someone said earlier, we would see a bump. The YMCA would send it out to their list of 10,000 people, and then we'd see a bump 2 days later of 500 more responses or, something like that. I also reached out to about 29 businesses or organizations like the Arts Council and the library gave them some of those yellow signs to hang in the window, as well as they put them up on the kiosks, bus stops, in the municipal building. And then we used just about all the technology that the municipality has, from our front page of our website, our social media, the newsletter, our new communications hub kind of software that we have where the survey was. So we intend to do all that. And I think a lot of times when people see something reinforced multiple times, that's when they really were filling something out, or in this case, might sign up for notifications and then sign up for the survey and, go to the open house. So we fully intend to do that again. And again, I found the list of community groups. Basically, first I started with the mayor's podcast and all the people he interviewed. Then I took some of the responses that everyone sent to me. And we really had some positive experiences. So if we could, double those 30 groups we reached out to, if everyone could send me just one or two, we could really, expand that net from the 4,000 or so to, many more residents of the town.
Don't forget the walkable Princeton bump.
Yeah, absolutely.
You signed it.
All right, so
Yeah,
that being
so-
said, are there any, oh, sorry, Liz.
No, I was just gonna say the same thing as you, that pause.
So in terms of the survey, we've gotten the comments. We're gonna make another pass in terms of the jargon. And then do we need to circulate this one more time quickly, or can we have or can we move forward with this? That's what I need the committee to tell us.
And Michael, before that, can you just kind of describe more how these two surveys will work together? How this one is more of the big picture one, and then we're gonna focus in?
Yes.
Or Liz, sorry about that.
Go ahead, Liz.
Yeah, so yeah, this one is really, yeah, the big picture, just sort of a baseline, what we want to see, what issues and opportunities and needs really rise to the top for the community. And then, you know, this will be presented at that first open house, which is, you know, scheduled for now for December. And we'll give the community time to, you know, review the findings, results, make sure it, you know, it's accurate, nothing's missing. And then over the winter, while working on all the recommendations and the drafting of the plan, we'll base that next survey to try to get an idea, get feedback on those draft recommendations and strategies. So there'll be more specific questions for that second survey that will then feed into, it will be presented at the second open house, which will follow the closing of that.
Okay. So basically, in summary, if there's something super specific that someone has a question or wants to add right now, it might not get included in this one, but it very well could be in the other or in some other outreach too.
Right. And yes, that's important, that this is not the only opportunity, right? The municipality, you'll be at events, you'll be at community meetings, you'll, you know, be doing surveys. There'll be lots of opportunity to have your specific needs and issues heard. We do have an open-ended, there is one open-ended question in the survey that kind of gives people an opportunity to really, to you know, what opportunities are you most excited about for Princeton? You know, that one is going to be really great to help us with sort of crafting the vision statement and some of those, what are people excited about, you know? So that was in this one.
Great. I see Tim has his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I don't want to review them here, but I wanted to make sure that the comments that I sent you yesterday about the survey were forwarded to Liz or CCH.
Yes, they were.
Okay,
Yep.
great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and we'll modify some of the options, the responses to make sure that the input on, you know, the facilities and as well as some of the age-friendly issues are incorporated into the survey.
Thanks, Liz.
Great. So Michael, you think we're at a point now for just general Q&A?
Yeah.
Great. And there's some voices we haven't heard from yet today. Sam, Alvin, Jack, anything on your minds about where we are, where we're going? And I see Sam's hand first.
Yeah, if I can go ahead, I think one of the questions that I have in trying to articulate the process of the public outreach effort is that there's a lot of uncertainty about what exactly each of these phases is, what each of these outreach events is going to entail, and how they mesh together and how they'll be used by the team to craft a new draft master plan. So, for example, if we go back to the engage.princetonmasterplan.org website, you know, I think that anyone who went to that can see that there has been a consumer survey. I fear that there may be some confusion about the consumer survey, that a lot of people actually thought that that was the survey for the master plan, as opposed to phase one of a multi-step public outreach effort. But for example, it's not clear I think for people, members of the public, how the community visioning survey number 1 will be different from the consumer survey. And it's not clear what the community meeting is going to involve, where that's going to be, how people will participate in it, how long it's going to be. I mean, and then what's the difference between the community meeting number 1 and open house number 1? It's hard for me to articulate to people about what the nature of the outreach effort is going to be, because I don't know the answer to those questions myself. And there's very limited information about it on the website about exactly what's going to happen in each of those steps and how that information is going to be used.
Well, we can work with Liz and Susan to flesh out those a little bit more. The community meetings are conducted by the municipality, so they may be one, they could be more than one. It's really the municipality's option as to how many of those community meetings need to happen. So we've put in 2. We're going to work with Justin to identify those sectors of the community that there's a sense that need to have a specific meeting around. So we can work to flesh that out, and I take your point on that. I think it's important to hear it.
Yeah, because I mean, these community meetings are supposed to be happening in fall of the community meeting is supposed to be happening in fall of 2022. By some measures, fall of 2022 starts next week. So, I mean, what's the date?
Did we say they would be after the survey's closed?
Yeah, some of these will be after the surveys close. The open houses are targeted for after that. But the community meetings can happen during the surveys to help drive the surveys or help people to take the surveys, like the pop-up events that will be a little less structured.
Can we perhaps have on the September agenda a presentation that gets to the kind of specifics that Sam is asking about? Both the dates for these events and what are the objectives associated with each of them? Is that a reasonable thing for September agenda? I think that he's raising a really good point.
I would actually hope we could get that before that meeting, because like Sam pointed out, September 1st might be the fall to some, but September 29th is definitely the fall to all.
Right.
Yes.
Correct.
And then, it also just discussing the format of that open house. We've learned that we have to be really flexible the last couple of years about, in-person, virtual, hybrid, so those details we do need to work out sooner than later. And I think that would be a good conversation topic for the September meeting as well.
Yes, I think you're going to run into venue issues as well. Like a lot of venues are booking or are already booked for fall. So you need to do some identify the venues where you hope to have the outreach event, the first outreach event, and approach them now, even if it's like 3 or 4 different venues, and and start thinking about dates and seeing what's available, what's open on their calendars.
Mm-hmm.
I see Jack has his hand up. Jack, you're on mute right now.
Louise, I can't seem to cope with a high-tech process, can I, of mute and unmute? This happens all the time at the planning board. In any event, first of all, I want to say, Louise, 3 cheers for your comment about the role of the master plan and how it was phrased in the engagement hub. I think incredibly important at the outset of any such process is a clear understanding on everyone's part of why we're doing this and where we're going. And while it doesn't have to be a long document, we have to be very careful, in my view, how we tell the public what we're doing and what we're going to do with it. And Tim, I was just thinking the reference Louise made too is to the role of the master plan subcommittee of the planning board and our job. Perhaps Louise and Tim, maybe it would be useful if the subcommittee on the master plan gave some thought to the language of how we wish to define or explain the purpose, the role of the plan going forward. So whenever there is a quick tick, and again, a reference is made to the purpose, it says the kinds of things, conveys the message that we want it to. A couple of other things that are just thoughts that I would suggest at some point in the process we may wish to address, which I haven't heard being referenced up to now. The following, maybe 3 or 4. Number one, the issue of population. We're 31,000 today. What kind of city we are bears some relationship to how many people we're comfortable having as our neighbors and our fellow voters. So some attention to how big, what population makes sense to me. Secondly, while it's perhaps assumed, some reference to the growth and development projected and schooling, the quality of our school system. We should at least resolve in our own minds what's the role, if any, of a discussion in the master planning process of its implications to schooling, because that's why, of course, as the surveys indicate, many people, many parents prioritize Princeton in the first place. The third is that whenever we're dealing with land use or any kind of action plans for a Princeton, we're talking about debits and credits and financial implications. And I realize that can be a very sensitive, complicated subject, but such things as maintaining our AAA credit rating do bear a direct and very real relationship to A, how we're viewed by investors and those looking at our community, but more importantly, to our ability to raise the kind of money that we need, we want to accomplish our objectives at a, not a reasonable rate, at the top rate. Most people, in my experience, do check what's the credit rating of Princeton, and some attention to that I think should be given. And the final is an obvious point, but just let me make it. I think one of the most important aspects of what we're doing is creating a process, creating a plan which can be implemented. A plan in which the vision, the principles, the themes that we address are clear, the data gathered and analyzed in presenting them is available and clear and simply stated for all concerned, that we have an effective action plan, not simply for monitoring, but also for implementing. I use language which comes out of the street, I suppose, but I'm an advocate always of a time-dated implementation plan, action plan, or work program. And so we're early on in the process, and those are the items I simply wanted to highlight, although I'm sure they've all been thought about by each of you in the process. They're fairly self-evident. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. And I see, Brian, you have your hand up. Do you want to respond to that? Or Michael, do you want to respond first?
I don't think I need to respond to it. I think that Jack brings up things that are normally looked at in a master plan. I will say this, Jack, just, you know, I've never discussed bond ratings in a master plan before, or credit ratings. It's something that may be an outcome of how growth is managed in Princeton at some point, or how, whatever, but it's not something we typically address. But the, you know, in terms of population projections and densities, those are things that are typically covered in the master plan, so.
No, I appreciate that, and perhaps it simply reflects the difference of our backgrounds. My master planning exercise tends to be with governments outside the United States, and such considerations are always at least a part of the discussion, which is why I raise it.
Right. Thank you.
I will add only also that I think there is a requirement in a master plan to coordinate with the Board of Education on their long-term facilities planning.
Yeah.
So that's built into the process as well.
Good.
And I see Brian, you have your hand up. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to second and strongly reinforce Jack's point about including focus on the public schools, which we know are very important in this community and a reason many come. And offer in October and November, if our business administrator is available, to, if it's helpful, make a short presentation to this group to understand that as population grows, as school-age children grow, the tax base, the growth of the tax base does not benefit the schools due to the state tax cap on the the tax cap. And I think, so if you add 3,000 people, and that includes some school-age families, and you get, I'll just say 200 more students, it doesn't come with revenue to educate those 200 more students. So part of the discussion needs to be how we sustain the quality of our schools in a growing community.
Thanks, Brian. And we'll certainly, I'm sure these things and many other things are going to continue to come up. So we'll keep an eye on that too. And do we have any other questions at this time for the question and answer? I see, Nick, you have your camera back on. I'm trying to look see who we have not heard from yet today, or some people that we have heard from. All right, well, with that being said, I guess I'll give it another minute, see if any hands virtually or physically shoot up. And if not, then Michael, do you have any closing remarks, or Joe or Liz? Mark?
I think that I appreciate your hanging in there for 2 hours today. I think we got through a large amount of the material we wanted to get through. It's been helpful to get your feedback, particularly on the community visioning survey #1, and also your feedback on the economic survey going forward into the student survey. So I appreciate that. As I said before, we're going to be getting you more information in the next couple of weeks for your review on the existing policies. And we will convene our minds to work with Justin to lay out and anticipate the dates and formatting for these public outreach events to give more clarity to that.
And I see Louise's hand up, but before that, we're still intending to meet on September 28th at 2 p.m., the fourth Wednesday of September. Please let me know if you can't make it. If a lot of people can't make it, then we can move it around. But if not, please keep that time aside.
And just to get a sense of what might happen at that meeting, we would presumably we would already be getting results from the surveys and having an understanding of that. So we may be able to share, I would anticipate being able to share initial participation results with that. And then focusing on the policy document, the policy primer that we provided to you. So.
And details on.
And Louise?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to raise my hand before Michael spoke, but I couldn't get my cursor to the right place in time. I just wanted to let the committee know that Tim Quinn and I met with Justin and Michael and Elaine last week to look at the detailed agenda for this meeting. And going forward, Tim and I will continue to do that, and joining us will be Christine Symington and Alvin McGowan. We just have this sort of support team that meets or is on hand for these agenda setting meetings to provide feedback and advice as it's asked for, and to address questions that might come up in between meetings. An example might be if a press advisory is going to go out, we might take a look at it ahead of time, that kind of thing. I just want to emphasize that this is not an executive committee. It is not a committee that makes decisions in lieu of this steering committee. It's just a smaller group to bounce stuff off of in between as those issues come up. So I wanted, in the spirit of transparency, to let everybody know that.
Great, thanks, Louise. So we have 10 minutes left. We could leave early. We could talk about the Mets-Yankees game yesterday. I think we'll probably all want to leave early, especially us Mets fans.
Go Phils.
So,
let's go Yankees.
Phils.
But
Justin, I know we'd like to thank everyone who participated as a stakeholder or a survey respondent or helped get the word out about the survey. You delivered a great result, and we're really pleased with the amount of data we collected. Thank you all.
Excellent. Yeah, and thank you just everyone on both sides or all sides for being here today. I look forward to meeting again in September. And like I said, if you want to reach out to me, email, phone, meet in person, anything like that, I'm happy to do so.
He has a team at Tuesday Night Trivia at the Ivy too, if you want to stop by.
Yeah.
His team is never gets on the podium or hasn't gotten on the podium yet. So
Good place last night. So
they're consistent fifth place. So
yeah.
and Justin, I noticed that there's talk of the Jugtown Block Party being reinvigorated in September. So that would be a good opportunity to at least get in front of some people with so we can talk offline about that.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's everyone, please send me anything that you think would be helpful to attend, or give out some flyers or anything like that too.
Yeah, Sam, don't you have a potluck in North Central there? That's the kind of thing that, those are the kind of events that would just be a sort of introduction and hand out a card that says, come to our engagement hub or to a meeting. Of course, we need a date and a venue for the meeting, but.
Yep.
But for those community outreach events, if Justin, you can keep some kind of list, as that grows, that becomes a pretty impressive list.
Absolutely.
Plan.
Yep. Definitely. Well, all right then, everyone. Thank you for your time, and we will see you soon.
All right.
Thanks very
See you all.
much.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.